my opinion hasn't really changed on this Rayshard Brooks situation. I'm not a police officer, clearly. I'm not an attorney. I don't know the law left and right. If this officer is charged with something, I guess it'll be up to a jury. I don't know. I don't know if he used excessive force or not. I don't know if he needed to use deadly force. I don't know the law, but here's what I do know. In my opinion, like I said, my opinion hasn't changed from yesterday. And my opinion is this. If you're dumb enough, and yes, that's what I call it, very dumb, to scuffle with police, to throw punches at police officers, to take a police officer's taser, to run from police and then turn around and point a taser at an officer and shoot a taser, I don't feel bad for you. Was the officer justified? Like I said, I'm not a police officer. I'm not an attorney. We're going to get more information on that with some of our guests today. But based on what I saw in that video, and I've watched it over and over and over again, and I've watched different angles, could the police officer have not shot his weapon? Sure. Is it possible that the police officer could have just let him go? Sure. Is it possible that the one officer that had a taser could have chased after him and tased him? Sure. It's possible. But the question is going to be, the officer that shot and killed Rayshard Brooks, did he feel his life was in danger? Or did he feel his partner's life was in danger? And if a jury, and that's if he's charged with anything, by the way, and I'm assuming that there won't be charges filed. But if there is charges filed, then it's going to be up to the jury. But I'll tell you what I don't like. I'll tell you what frustrates me, and I heard it yesterday, and that's the Atlanta mayor, Keisha Lance. Keisha Lance Bottoms on Monday described the Brooks killing as murder. I think that is, in my personal opinion, irresponsible. Have a listen to this. This is the Atlanta mayor speaking yesterday at a press conference about the Rayshard Brooks case. Have a listen to this.
On Friday evening, we saw the murder of Rayshard Brooks. And as I've said before, I am often reminded of the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. There is a fierce urgency of now.
I think there's a fierce urgency of rushing to judgment. That's what I think, based on everything else that's going on in the world. Again, this is not the Ahmaud Arbery case. This is not the George Floyd case. There are different circumstances surrounding this case. And for the mayor to call it murder when this guy clearly resisted arrest and shot a taser at an officer is completely irresponsible on her part. And I'm very disappointed in her because I've always liked her. I think she made a big mistake there. So then we have members of the family. And as I mentioned, Rayshard Brooks' sister is going to be coming up in hour number 2. And I really feel for the family. I'm not angry at the family. They did nothing wrong. In fact, I can see the pain that they're going through. It's horrible. This is a terrible situation. There's no winners here. This is awful. And I understand the family is grieving, and I understand the family is going to back their guy who was killed. I totally understand that. I don't blame them for anything. I'm not a big fan of these attorneys that they hired, but I understand. So Rayshard Brooks' niece spoke yesterday. Her name is Chastity Evans. And she claims her uncle did absolutely nothing wrong. Have a listen to this.
No one walking this green earth expects to be shot and killed like trash in the street for falling asleep in a drive-thru.
Okay, so here's my response to that. Again, I know the family's grieving. They lost a loved one. They're angry. They're hurt. Those are all normal emotions. And it was very difficult to watch because at the end of that press conference with the family, they had to walk out because they were crying. One of the gentlemen, I think one of the cousins, was yelling at the media and just hurt. And as he's walking out of the press conference, he's saying, "You killed the wrong guy. You killed the wrong guy. He's not a criminal." And again, my heart goes out to the family. Can't imagine the pain. I think to myself, if somebody in my family were, this was the circumstance, I don't even know how I would react. But I'll say this. Very few, if any, people in the media are calling out Rayshard Brooks for what he did wrong. And that is resisting arrest, throwing punches at police officers, grabbing one of the police officers' tasers, pointing it and shooting it at one of the officers. Not to mention
driving drunk.
Not to mention, well, that's what I was going to say. Not to mention that he was obviously driving drunk. And I'll tell you something. If I'm the owner of a business and somebody is blocking a drive-through,
I'm calling the police.
Absolutely.
100%.
He was absolutely breaking the law there as well. Police officers did not have any obligation to let him go. So can we stop with that narrative? Oh, he should have just let him go. Stop it with that already.
Well, or the narrative that the police officer didn't let him go simply because he was African American. That's the narrative now.
Okay, well, I haven't heard that narrative, but I've heard a lot of people just say, could have let him go, could have de-escalated, could have. First of all, everything was very calm. That is what is so weird about this whole situation. Rayshard Brooks was acting like a really nice guy. A nice guy who admitted that he probably had too much to drink. He was very respectful to the officers. And to the officers' credit, they were also very respectful to him. Everything was going fine.
I think what happened was Rayshard Brooks was trying to be nice to the officers in hopes that they would just let him walk away and they would not put him in handcuffs. And once he figured out that that didn't work, he flipped his approach entirely and decided to attack them. And the reason, whatever that reason is, obviously you can see in that video that particular moment when he decided that this is not my initial approach is not being effective. Yes, these officers are being cordial and polite to me and vice versa, but I'm not going to get what I want. So I need to go to plan B. And I think that plan B is exactly what we watched happen in that video.
So that's a theory, and that's possible. I'm not saying that's not possible, but here's what I think, and I'll even make it even more simple. I think drugs and alcohol. Clearly he was drunk. Now here's the problem with being drunk. And by the way, I want to know if he was on any drugs, too. That could also be possible. As we learned in the George Floyd situation, there were drugs in George Floyd's body. When you're by yourself and you're on narcotics, drugs or alcohol, or maybe both, nothing good is going to happen there if there are police involved. You're not going to behave the way that you would normally behave if you were not drunk or you weren't on drugs. I'm just speaking in obviosity right now, right? So it could be what you just said. But it could also be the guy was drugged out or drunk. We know he was definitely drunk. Well, and you're not thinking
he blew
clearly.
a .108, I believe, which is still legally intoxicated, but it's not a .2 or a .2.
I want to know if there was something else in his system. That's definitely possible. Because, yes, there's something not right about that video. He didn't start aggressive at all. In fact, he seemed like a really nice guy. He was very respectful to the officers. He said at one point, I respect what you guys do. He did everything the police officers asked him to do. It appeared as though he was being honest. He said, do you remember being in the line? He probably didn't remember being in the line because he was half asleep and he was drunk. He was probably telling the truth. And then all of a sudden, in a split second, when the officer who shot him, says, can you please put your hands behind your back? Please put your hands behind your back. Within a split second, his mind everything just changed. And in the not to compare, contrast to the George Floyd situation, but George Floyd was on narcotics. He was on meth. There was stuff in his system.
He was also on fentanyl.
Yeah, there was stuff in his system that will make you act a certain way. It could make you hallucinate. And the point I'm trying to make is this.
Back to Floyd really quick. That AG, Keith Ellison, has still refused to release the video of before when apparently he resisted arrest, or at least that's what Thomas Lane's lawyer claimed.
Yeah, I don't want to go into the details of the George Floyd case, but all I'm saying.
Well, you brought it up.
The only reason why I brought it up is because George Floyd was on drugs. He wasn't acting like he probably normally would if he wasn't on drugs. And when you're by yourself, it goes to show you, lesson learned. Sadly, George Floyd is no longer with us. Rayshard Brooks is no longer with us. But it goes to show you, if you're going to be drunk or you're going to be on anything, you probably should be around people that you trust.
Or do it at home.
Or that. Yeah. Or when you're by yourself and there's police officers involved, not going to be a good ending here. So it's an ongoing investigation now. And you have the Atlanta mayor that's calling it murder. Is that going to help anybody right now? Is that going to help ease racial tension in this country? I think it is very irresponsible for any member of – this is not the George Floyd case, okay? George Floyd, we all should agree.
Second-degree murder, possibly first-degree murder, if they had a prior relationship and there was some type of situation between them.
But there's a lot of gray area to this shooting of Rayshard Brooks. A ton of gray area to what the law is. But I think it is going to come down to this, and it is very simple. Some of you might not think it's simple. I think it's very simple. If this officer gets charged with anything, it's going to come down to this. It's going to come down to Did the officer truly believe that his life was in danger or his partner's life was in danger? If the answer is yes, a jury will believe it, and there will be no convictions. But if the answer is no, this police officer could go to jail. There could be some charges filed. I just don't know. There's a lot of gray area. And again, we'll take some phone calls at 702-257-5396. I ask you guys the question, am I wrong here? Whatever happened to taking personal responsibility for your actions? Whether you believe the cop used excessive force and should not have used deadly force on this man, whatever happened to personal responsibility? Can we take responsibility for resisting arrest? Can we take responsibility for kicking and throwing punches at police officers? What about taking a taser gun? Because if somebody is capable of taking a taser gun from an officer, you're telling me they're not capable of taking the other gun that'll kill somebody? And then pointing it at an officer and shooting it at an officer? What would happen if that was you or me? Forget about skin color for a second. What would happen if I took a taser gun from a police officer, fired it, and shot it at a cop? I can tell you what most likely would have happened.
At relatively point-blank range.
One of two things is going to happen, and I don't care what the color of your skin is. One of two things is going to happen. Either the officer is going to try to tase you, or he's going to shoot you. It is going to be one or the other. He's not going to tackle you. He's not going to get closer to you. He's either going to shoot you with his gun or fire a taser at you. Not a very good spot to be in.